careful, Turtles. The body is steel, and the threat is real. Here's your look at the Mattel Turtles of Grayskull, Sla'kor, evil cybernetic snapping turtle. When Krang's scheme to mutate He-Man required a test subject, Skeletor knew just who to use, He-Man's robotic doppelganger, Faker. Covered in the same mutagen that created the evil turtle Slash, the diabolical duplicate rose from the ooze as the deadly robot turtle Sla'kor. I guess when it comes to evil science experiments, you gotta fake it to make it. Just before we get a closer look at the Turtles of Grayskull Sla'kor, the tape measure is going to tell us that he's a pretty tall figure. I probably didn't even need a tape measure to tell you guys that. The figure, in fact, is going to stand almost close to 7 inches in height, or Sla'kor is going to be 17 centimeters tall. I almost feel that's one of my criticisms with Sla'kor, is the fact that the figure is way too big. If you were to, say, compare him along with another Turtles of Grayskull character, this happens to be Leonardo. Yes, he's mutated. Yes, which is strange, he's also a mutated Faker. So you would think, though, like, why would he turn into a turtle if he's a mutated robotic He-Man? But that's besides the point. If you, though, to compare him, say, with Leonardo, I feel like, if anything, he probably should have just been a little bit taller, not to the size that he is right now. Comparing him also as well with He-Man. Now, this is also the mutated He-Man. He's going to still be the same size. So He-Man apparently can be mutated by the mutagen and still stay around the same size as a regular Motu figure. Sla'kor, on the other hand, goes to proportions way beyond the size of a normal scale. He, if you were to compare him even with, like, Ram Man, for example. Now, Ram Man, again, was a mutated Motu figure. He's still a pretty big figure, but he's not nearly the size, though, of Sla'kor. Here's also as well what the figure looks like with the evil Shredder. Not only is Sla'kor a large figure, but he also comes with component pieces to start building Metal Botto. Metal Botto is, I guess, the equivalent of Metal Head in the world of Turtles of Grayskull. You get 2 parts already. You get the lower half trunks, which basically involves also as well the legs, and you get as well the face, or the head. What seems interesting, though, is at the bottom of the head, there's a little button. When you press the button, it moves up and down his mouth. The only thing that's really disappointing about this, though, is, you know, the whole time that they always continue to sell the idea that you can mix and match the parts. In fact, there's a paper right here that tells you that. Opening up the paper quickly. Yeah, you can remove, obviously, the parts for Sla'kor, and you can mix and match them around with other component pieces. And yet, though, ironically enough, Metal Botto, if looking at this, you would think, hey, that'd be kind of a cool head to use with other figures. You can't. It's a different size, the ball joint. The one time, ironically enough, that you did want to maybe build this, and maybe even if I had any ideas of swapping the head out for Sla'kor in favor of maybe Metal Botto, I can't do that because it's a completely different ball joint system on the bottom of it. You could, though, use the trunks as an example here. We're going to do a little dissecting here of Skeletor, or not Skeletor here, of Shredder. Let's just grab the figure. I've just got him off to the side. I'm knocking everything off in the process. Shredder here, I'm going to just remove the lower half of his body, because, of course, you can mix and match these parts. If you did want to, you could take the part from Metal Botto, and it just snaps on. It's just a regular Master Universe lower half body, so there's nothing really different there. You can also as well change out the boots. You can do a whole lot of other things as well, but that's just, I did that only just to show you. Let's put his best back of his body back together here. I just wanted to show you that if you wanted to, you could use this body technically for something other than Metal Botto. It looks good, though. I am looking forward to building, although funny enough, though, nothing is advertised on the packaging as to what characters you would also need to build the remaining pieces. This is also 1 of 4. 2 of 4, in fact, because you're getting the head and you're also getting the lower half of the body. So I guess you only really need, what, another 2 figures in order to completely build the figure. Anyways, we're going to move those off to the side because there's not really much more we can do with it. I'm also a little disappointed by the fact that this figure doesn't come included with a mini comic. You would look at this and assume right away that this is a mini comic. Unfortunately, though, what it is just a piece of cardboard. On the back of it, sure, yes, it tells you all about Sla'kor, the fact that he's a mutagen master and all his powers, near-perfect He-Man replica, superhuman strength, robotic endoskeleton, Slash, evil mutated snapping turtle, psycho with a spiked shell, and ooze for brains. I love that they said ooze for brains. But all this is just a cardboard piece. It's fine. I mean, it's got good-looking artwork, and I'm glad that they gave you somewhat of a statistical stats on the back. I would have rather, though, a mini comic. You know, we always tend to get these mini comics with whether it be these figures or it be the regular Master Universe Origins figures, but this, unfortunately, for Sla'kor, he gets slacked, unfortunately, when it comes to a mini comic. So I'm just going to hold on to this for right now. I don't really know what I'm going to do with it exactly. The figure also comes include some additional accessories as well, like, first of all, his spiked shell. The spike shell serves as two purposes. First of all, he's got a little handle on the bottom of it. So if you wanted to, the figure could also use it really as a shield. The shield works best really if you have them. First of all, if you want to, I'm going to use this hand over here. I find this is the better hand to hold the shield. It clips into his hand, although unfortunately, if you look at the way that the fingers, these tiny little piggies that went to the market, they're very close to the palm. So you have to kind of wedge that in there. And even then, it's a struggle to get everything in place. A lot of times, what just ended up happening, it seems to be the thing that always ends up happening, I lose his lower half of his body. There we go. But this basically would, though, fit in his hands. It's just a little harder because the hands are also a very hard plastic too, so it's very difficult to pry them away from the palm. But for all of the intensive purposes, you'd be able to have them holding the shield. The better idea in mind, though, is if you look on the back of the figure, there's holes on the backs. Now, when we have looked at the rest of the Turtles of Grayskull figures, they all have sort of worked the exact same way. So there's holes, and then there's pegs on the back of the shield, or the back of the shell, and that just plugs onto the back of the figure's body. Now, I suppose you could do it this way. You could also flip this around as well. Having it flipped around, it does also have that top spike sticking up, so that might be the better option to go with. And that just plugs onto the back of the figure's body. Just make sure it's all the way on there. There's also a storage space here as well for the next included accessories. The figure comes with these gnarly looking blades. Not only are they dangerous for the blades, but they're also dangerous as he has these protruding spikes at the back. They're cast here in a very nice orange plastic. It can either, though, be fit into his hands, and you're obviously going to have still the same struggle getting these into his blasted hands. There we go, there's one. And if you want to do, you can obviously have him holding both of them, but there's also, again, that storage space on the back. You just take the blade and slide it down the slot, and now he's got some storage space there as well. Ideally, it would have been fun if they could have actually had two slots instead of just the one, so if you wanted to have storage space for both blades, you could do that. Unfortunately, though, he only has one spot, so we're just going to move that off for right now. We're also going to take the blade off on his hand, and we're also going to just let go. There we go. Put it off to the side there as well. Being the fact that this figure is also based on Faker, he also has the revealed, well, obviously he has the revealed little wheels, little spinning things that Faker would have had originally on his body. To get it, though, a better idea of what that looks like, you can also take the shell off. You can also pop the head off as well. There we go. And you can take this entire back section off. This just attaches here. And just pry it away from itself. There we go. And you just flip this around. Now, I'm obviously going to have to take this all off too as well. The one time, there we go, the one time it struggles with me, this basically just comes off completely. And you get a very similar sort of deco. The thing that's rather interesting, though, about it, instead of actually having little wheels spinning, they're actually pizzas. Oh, it looks like somebody's already had a slice there and a slice there. So a nice little nod to the Turtles, of course. Let's get this back onto his body. So we'll just drape this back on the bottom. We'll flip it around to the front. And then we'll meet this down at the bottom before we start snapping everything back in place. The thing always about these is that you can only do them a few times before this starts to stretch the plastic way too much. Luckily, it hasn't happened yet for me. Let's go ahead and pop the head back in place. There we go. And you can also as well take the lower half of his body. Now, if you're also asking as well, with the way that they've designed the body, can you also use it for another figure? Well, hey, we've already had Shredder being dissected. Just pop, again, the lower half of his body. We'll pop this back off as well. Even though it is really technically a larger torso, you could still, funny enough, use the lower half of Sla'kor's body with a regular Master Universe Origins figure. And hilarity, I'm sure, will ensue. So let's pop this back into his body. There we go. And we'll put, obviously, the shell back in place as well. Other than really the already mentioned, I feel like the figure is way too big conversation that we were having earlier. Was that a conversation? I felt it was a conversation. All in all, though, I like the look of the character. I've always been a big fan of Slash. It was one of my earliest figure pickups when the Playmates days first were around with the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Slash was one of the earlier figures I picked up. I like the look of him, how they've crossed both Slash and, of course, Faker together. So you've got a blue-skinned version of Slash this time around with this really large, gnarly-looking gold eye. Looking, though, at the face, one thing I couldn't help but notice is there's a little line right here. Almost for a second believing that perhaps the mouth would be able to open and close. It isn't, and I'm not sure why that was sculpted separately. Almost as if they tooled one piece of it, decided like maybe the lower half of the mouth wasn't working for them, and they decided to sculpt and mold a separate piece. But there's clearly a line right there where it looks like it's obviously separate from the rest of his face. It's a little off-putting, but if you're obviously looking at it from the front, you're never really going to be noticing it. Some things, though, he picks up from Slash is the fact he does have like little spikes. I think the original Slash had shoulder spikes. These are done nicely, though, in pink. He's got pink down below here as well. The backwards S this time around. And he's also got, of course, any Master of the Universe Origins figure will have themselves a loincloth. Even though whether he's a robotic turtle or not, he's also going to have one as well. The colors are really working quite well for this guy. Even though I feel still he's a little too big on the size, he does really kind of work well. And for the most part, I'm really liking the look of this guy. There are a few little problems, like generally his hands I don't find hold the things all that well, especially when it comes to his shield. But to be all honest, though, the shield is always really going to be on the back of the figure's body anyways. I have no plans at all to have the figure displayed with the shield in his hands. The articulation on this guy is going to be exactly the same as regular Motu figures, other than just the fact that everything's going to be scaled up. The head's going to be on a ball joint, so it rotates all the way around. Obviously, you can see that the bandana on the back, while not having any additional articulation, it is one thing that's going to be getting a little more in the way when you try to rotate the figure's head. The head looks up and down, and also you can move it back and forth. Shoulder hinging isn't so much a difficult thing. You would think that with the shoulders being like this, with the shoulder pads, that arm bending like this, even at 90 degrees, would be a little bit more difficult. It's not the case at all. In fact, you can also rotate the arms forward and back this way. The figure does have a swivel in his elbow, which also serves as the hinge, and the hands also rotate all the way around. The figure has just a straight swivel. Even though he does have the big bulky shell on the back of his body, it doesn't impede at all any bit of swiveling that you want to do for the waist. Legs split out. You can take the figure's legs and move forward, move them back. Has a bend at the knee. You can also rotate the lower leg. You can also rotate the boot. And he also has the monster-sized feet that also have a hinge there too, so you can move that back and forth. And yes, you can rock it. Although the rocking isn't as much successful as normal Motu figures, he still manages to rock just a little bit. All in all, though, I like the figure quite a bit. The guy was a little harder to come by, and I ended up getting this guy over on Facebook groups. Facebook groups seems to be a good place lately to be getting a lot of the Motu stuff. Daryl had hooked me up before. If you are familiar with this channel, you know that Daryl's picked me up a couple of things. He was also nice enough to also grab me a Slash. So that's why we're having a look at him right now. Funny though enough is when it comes to really the Master Universe or Turtles of Grayskull figures, I've actually generally been more interested in the stuff that we're getting from the mutated line than the actual turtles themselves. Leonardo, as a good example here, was a fine-looking turtle, and even in the review I said, like, the head sculpt on him was really, really good. But I feel like I'm almost even more leaning more to the mutated side of things. I like the look of really Sla'kor. Sla'kor turned out to be a great-looking figure. Yes, a combination, though, of Faker and Slash, and a good really way of taking, Slash, Faker, Sla'kor. I think it works quite well. The character looks good. I feel, again, he might be a little bit too big because the original Slash, and again, I'm only basing it from the original Playmates days, Slash would only have been really the same size as a regular turtle. He just would have been mutated. I don't feel like he necessarily needed to be this big. I'm glad that he's the size that he is, but maybe just a little bit shorter. Just a little bit shorter. The figure does have some decent levels of articulation. And of course, he also has the starting points of what would eventually be Metal Bato, which again, we only have really the lower legs. And again, a head, which I probably will talk more about when we eventually do build Metal Bato. Really disappointed that this couldn't have found a way to be a regular ball joint. I know it probably would have dismissed the whole idea that he would have had a mouth that opened and closed. I'm sure many people would probably more favor the idea that it would do this over the fact it would be able to be customized with other figures. But it's ironic enough, the one time we are looking at these Master Universe figures, and you actually don't have a mix and matchable part that can be changed around with other figures. Sla'kor is a welcomed addition to my current Master Universe figures, whether it be the Turtles of Grayskull or just the Master Universe Origins figures. Sla'kor would fit in fine with either one of them. He does have, of course, those component swapped out pieces that if you wanted to have a little fun, you could take off the arms, you could take off the legs, and easily just mix and match them, as I did do with the Shredder in this review. Sla'kor looks both the combination of Faker, which is one of my favorite Master Universe figures, and of Slash, one of my all-time favorite Playmates turtles. So for me, at least, it's the best of both worlds. The colors on this guy look really good. I don't think there's really a lot of paint. It seems to be like they really relied on more the molding of the plastic, and that works fine for me. The colors, though, that they pulled from Faker, the colors that they've pulled also from Slash, are just a happy marriage molded together to give us this cybernetic snapping turtle. His accessories are also pretty small. I mean, he only has just the two blades. The blades are pretty big on their own. He has at least a storage space on the back of his shell, which the shell also serves as its own accessory, either being housed on the back of his body, or you can also use it as well for a shield. The shield is a little harder, though, to get into his hands. His hands as a whole are just very hard plastic to try to negotiate with. You could easily get the blades in there. I had a harder struggle, as you saw in this review, to get him to hold that blasted shield. Nice looking figure, though. He could, again, probably have been a little bit shorter, but all in all, though, really a nice looking addition to my collection. Have you guys had the chance to pick up Sla'kor? Let me know down below in the comments section. And if you have been collecting the Turtles of Grayskull, I know it's sort of a divisive line in the sense that Master Universe figure collectors probably aren't going to be as interested getting Turtles with Grayskull. On the other end of it, Turtle fans, Turtle collectors, may not be, they'll be as interested in Master Universe. But if you are a fan of both, it's certainly a good line to be picking up. If you guys did enjoy this video, why not hit it with a like? If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing and want to certainly stick around for more, we are going to be having a whole bunch of other videos coming your way this coming week. So making sure you're coming back on a regular basis. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.